IASD Command Center. Velmara 4. The air inside the IASD Command Center was thick with tension, the dim glow of holographic screens casting shifting shadows against the steel-gray walls. At the center of the war room, Commander Rose stood like an unyielding pillar, arms crossed, her piercing eyes scanning the streams of data projected before her. Each flickering report painted the same grim picture. Street pickers, the lowest rung of the trafficking syndicates, were on the move, working at an unprecedented pace across multiple star systems. Orders were coming in fast, too fast. Someone, somewhere, was building up stock. The weight of it sat heavily on her shoulders. She had seen patterns like this before, right before something catastrophic. Her jaw tightened as she turned sharply, fixing her gaze on the one agent she knew could get answers. "Zero, you and your team are leaving immediately," she ordered, her voice carrying the unshakable authority of years spent in command. "Get in, find out who's pulling the strings and shut them down." Standing before her, Agent Zero looked as she always did, calm, composed, and ready. With her delicate features, petite frame, and youthful appearance, she looked like someone who had no place in the world of warfare. But Rose knew better. Beneath that porcelain exterior was a living weapon. Ice-blue eyes met Rose's gaze without hesitation. "Understood, Commander." The war had already begun. Planet Myria, Slums District. The air was thick with the stench of decay and desperation. The slums of Myria were a labyrinth of crumbling structures, rusting scaffolds, and narrow alleyways where shadows swallowed the lost. This was the kind of place where people vanished without a trace, where the weak were taken, and the strong thrived on the suffering of others. Agent Zero moved through the filth-ridden alleys, her posture slumped, her expression carefully crafted into that of a lost soul. Her clothes, tattered and unwashed, were borrowed from the very people traffickers preyed upon. She had to become bait. She knew how to walk like prey, slow, uncertain, hesitant. She had done this many times before, and she knew the kind of person the pickers targeted. The desperate, the abandoned, the ones no one would come looking for. A flicker of movement in the periphery, a whisper of footsteps. She wasn't alone. A ragged voice slid through the darkness, carrying the stench of stale alcohol and rotten teeth. "Got nowhere to go, girl?" Zero let her body stiffen slightly, let her fingers twitch in hesitation. A slow, calculated movement that signaled fear, but not enough to make her seem entirely worthless. They didn't want the weak. They wanted the strong who had lost their way. The figure emerged from the shadows. A ganger, muscle-thick and cruel-eyed, gripping a stun stick crackling with blue energy. Zero didn't move. Not yet. She could take him. She could break his wrist before he blinked. But that wasn't the mission. The stun stick arced toward her. She felt the sharp pain lance through her neck, electricity surging through her nerves. A moment later, the world tilted and went black. High above, concealed in the shadows of a rooftop, Agent One clenched his fists as he watched her body crumple. His teeth ground together as the ganger grabbed Zero's limp form, slinging her over a shoulder like a sack of stolen goods. He didn't like this part of the mission. Letting her get taken. Target acquired, he muttered into his calm, his voice tight with restrained fury. On a distant ridge, hidden beneath an adaptive camouflage cloak, Agent 2 adjusted their long-range scanner. A faint blue dot flickered on the screen. Zero's tracker, embedded beneath her skin. "Tracker is live. I have eyes on her," Agent 2 confirmed, locking onto the signal. In the command center, Agent 3 monitored multiple data streams, fingers gliding over interface panels with calculated precision. Every movement, and every sound was catalogued and analyzed. "We'll follow," Agent 3 said coolly. "Stick to protocol." They had done this before, but every time the stakes were higher. And this time, something felt different. Aboard the slave transport. Deep space. A dull, rhythmic hum filled the air, vibrating through the cold metal floor beneath her. Zero's consciousness surfaced slowly, her senses sharpening even before she opened her eyes. The scent of stale sweat, unwashed bodies, and recycled air filled her nostrils. She kept still, feigning unconsciousness as she took in her surroundings. The cargo hold was dimly lit, the flickering overhead strips casting sickly yellow light over the huddled masses around her. Dozens of captives, various species, sat pressed together, their faces gaunt, their eyes filled with silent terror. Some whispered in hushed tones, others rocked back and forth, lost in shock. Zero carefully adjusted her breathing. Electronic locks on the main hatch, pulse dampeners along the walls meant to suppress sudden bursts of kinetic energy, likely to prevent riots. Motion sensors above. Standard setup. Nothing she hadn't escaped from before. Sloppy work. She tilted her head just enough to catch sight of the two guards stationed at the entrance. Rough-looking. Disinterested. Arrogant. They didn't see her as a threat. That was their first mistake. Muffled voices bled through the thin walls of the ship, arguing. "This batch is too big. Moving this many at once is stupid. Orders are orders. They want numbers, we deliver numbers. Who is they?" Zero's pulse remained steady, but her mind worked fast, filing away every word. There was always a buyer, always someone at the top of the chain pulling the strings. If this was happening across multiple systems, whoever they were dealing with had resources and power. She shifted slightly, just enough to press her shoulder against the cold steel wall behind her. No vibrations from the sublight drive, still in hyperspace. That meant they were far from any immediate rescue. Then, the ship lurched violently. A deafening boom reverberated through the hull, sending captives sprawling. The lights flickered. The hum of the ship's core faltered for half a second before stabilizing. Alarms blared. Panic erupted in the cargo hold. Attack in deep space. The first explosion rocked the ship. A dull, thunderous boom echoed through the hull, followed by the shriek of metal under stress. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the entire transport lurched sideways, sending bodies sprawling across the cargo hold. Zero caught herself before she hit the floor, already adjusting to the shifting gravity. She swore pirates, and then she smirked. Bad luck for the slavers. Worse luck for the pirates. Outside, the unmistakable sounds of weapons fire rattled through the bulkhead's pulse cannons hammering against the ship's aging shields, warning klaxons shrieking as systems failed one by one. The slavers shouted over the chaos, scrambling to secure their precious cargo. The captives, sensing an opportunity or perhaps just succumbing to terror, erupted into panic. Zero used the moment. Her movements were precise, one sharp elbow to the throat of the nearest guard, cutting off his yell before it could form. As he staggered back, she caught his wrist, twisted hard, and felt the satisfying pop of his joint snapping. His stunner clattered to the floor. Hers now. She turned just as another slaver lunged at her. A quick step, a brutal strike to the solar plexus. She crumpled, gasping for air. Outside, the battle intensified. The ship shuddered as explosions burst against its hull, plasma bolts slicing through the void. Thena knew presence. Through the narrow viewport, a sleek, Voidborn-class starcruiser materialized from the void, its dark hull shimmering as it phased back into normal space. IASD. Zero knew it had been lurking just beyond the dimensional veil, watching, waiting. The hunters had arrived. The Voidborn-class starcruiser caught the pirate ship by surprise, her plasma cannons ripping long tears along the side of the helpless vessel. Pirates were scum and deserved nothing less. Within minutes, all that was left was debris floating in the emptiness of space. In a flawless display of coordination, the IASD operatives breached the slaver ship. Explosive charges blew the airlock apart, and armored soldiers stormed in with military precision. Pulse rifles barked orders of their own swift, silent takedowns. The slavers never stood a chance. Zero had already disarmed a third opponent by the time Agent 1 swept into the cargo hold, pulse rifle raised. He took one look at the unconscious bodies at her feet and let out a low chuckle. "Having fun?" he quipped. Zero wiped a smear of blood from her cheek and tossed aside her stolen weapon. Could have been worse. Across the ship, Agent 2 secured the bridge, overriding the controls and shutting down all systems. No one was going anywhere without IASD's say-so. Agent 3's team arrived moments later, methodically extracting the captives, assessing injuries, and tagging the slavers for transport. The cleanup was swift. The captives? On their way to safety. The slavers? Restrained, their fates sealed in interrogation rooms. The data logs? Priceless. Zero exchanged a glance with Agent 1. This was only the beginning. IASD debriefing room. The air inside the debriefing chamber was thick with tension, the hum of holoscreens casting a cold glow over the gathered agents. Commander Rose stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Agent 3 tapped a control panel, bringing up a sprawling network of supply routes, encrypted transmissions, and cargo manifests pointing to one undeniable truth. "We found the buyer," Agent 3 reported, voice clipped and precise. "Massive orders are coming from an unknown faction. Multiple systems, same coded signals. This isn't locale, it's galaxy-wide." Rose's expression darkened as she studied the data. This wasn't just a trafficking ring. This was something bigger. "This isn't just some operation," she said slowly. "This is a war machine." Silence settled over the room. Zero exhaled sharply, fingers drumming against the table before she leaned forward. "Then we find out who's behind it," she said, her voice like sharpened steel. Rose nodded. "Gear up." Her gaze swept over them, unwavering. This was just the beginning. To be continued.